How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to the Real FI Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McGrath, with my co-host, James Rippion. How's it going today, James?
Going well, man. I am super excited about this episode. I think we're going to be dropping a lot of unique nugget bombs on everybody who's listening today. You're going to be getting some unique advice, not advice, experiential learning, we'll say. And, there's going to be some really practical stuff going on. So I'm looking forward to it, Patrick.
Me too. Now, for everyone that is watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment below on what you think this episode's going to be about. And we are going to introduce our guest. We are talking with Shannon out of Puerto Rico. How's it going today, sir?
Good, man. How are you guys doing?
Can't complain. Can't complain. James, you know the drill. Let's roll into this, man.
How's it going, Shannon? So to get us started, why don't you just give us a little bit of background on you and tell our listeners, where you came from and how you got started in life?
I'm actually the son of a builder. My mom was also a third generation realtor, so I'm fourth, my son's fifth. You seem to do things generationally, but I grew up in a household where my parents were talking about flipping deals and buying properties and building warehouses. My parents retired when I was 50 on cash flow, and I had no idea what that was. In fact, so much so that when I got out of high school, I was going to go to college and be something, not like my parents, right? Who always seemed to be broke. I actually told Robert Kiyosaki this, that his book was the least impressive book I'd ever written or read at 19 years old, because he just described my parents and they were dumb, right? That was my perspective on life at that age. And as I got older, I began to see that this wasn't stupid. In fact, the whole college route didn't work out for me because there was all this other stuff they wanted me to do that wasn't in line with what I wanted. And so I started building houses. I realized I didn't like homeowners. I got into the commercial world, and I realized that my skill set was solving problems. And I started solving problems and getting into the development side of things. We built schools and hospitals and city halls and fire stations and police stations. We did a couple $100 million worth of work, but I was always done the minute the building got a C of O. And then I started working with some partners where we'd get a single check writer involved. We'd do a big deal. That would be great. We'd all make money, but we never kept anything. And so then I kind of started getting into syndication over the last year or 2.5 years, and really have been able to figure out how to buy, build, hold, create value for my investors, but also be able to create massive cash flow and do that in a tax advantaged way, so that at the end of the day, you're left with something and you're keeping Uncle Sam out of your pie.
I like that. And I think, we kind of chatted about this a little bit before we jumped online. And I think that's going to be the underpinning theme of this conversation that we're all having is, structuring finances around taxes. So like, why don't we just dig into that a little bit and just, explore why that's such a significant thing for investors to focus on?
Well, I mean, let's talk about the reality that, if I can get you a 6 or a 7% cash on cash return, you're going to think that's pretty good. And if I can pull a 17 to 20% IRR out of the deal at the end, you're going to think I'm really phenomenal at this stuff, right? But what if I could save you 30% before we start? What if I could really make this something that at the beginning of the day is something that you can really use, something you can take to the bank, something that you're able to recognize benefit before the rest of this stuff hits. And when it does get to the point where you get your big return, you've also got a tax plan for that. So you get to keep it and keep Uncle Sam wondering what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that strategy. And I know for a lot of our listeners out there, we've talked about different types of things like, cost segregation analysis on buildings that you're doing, different ways to kind of depreciate assets, bonus depreciation, all of that. But you are doing some completely different strategies and have a totally different, outlook on how and why you invest. So I'd like to kind of dive into that a little bit and give us kind of like your motto, I guess, on investing.
Well, let's just talk about the cost segregation for a minute, right? So you buy something and you've got this vision of rehabbing it and making it better, right? And so you go, you finish it off, and you do your cost segregation, and everybody's happy. But if you strategize that properly, your cost segregation is going to take the value of the property. Let's call it a $3 million property and $1 million in value in the land. And you've got $2 million there that you're going to be able to create depreciation out of immediately. Well, what about all those improvements that you're doing? What about your tenant improvements, right? Are you calling that rehab, or are you calling that tenant improvements and one-time expenses that you're also taking 100% of your costs of remodel year one? Why are you not calling it something different? The problem is everybody's talking to their accountant in April going, oh yeah, we remodeled. And the accountant goes, okay, well, you put paint on the walls, so that's a 7-year item. And then you put carpet in, and that's a 5-year. They're not, because you're giving them the wrong verbiage. If you say it was a tenant improvement is over the life of the lease, apartments are 1-year leases. So now all of a sudden, everything changes about what you told your accountant. You told them the same thing. You just told them the right thing, right? We do other things that have massive tax implications on them. We do a lot of stuff in opportunity zones, right? Everybody loves capital gains because it's less than ordinary income, but everybody tries to avoid that by doing a 1031. We do projects in opportunity zones, which allow you to take only your capital gains. Instead of having to do a 1031, you put 100 grand in. Patrick, I put 100 grand in your deal. You did really well. 4 years later, I got 2X, so I got 100 grand in capital gains, 100 grand in my initial investment. And then I want to do a 1031 into something else. Number one, that's a little bit difficult, but if I wanted to go into an opportunity zone, I would just take my 100 grand and I would go put that in an opportunity zone. Those taxes won't be due on my opportunity zone investment until 2026, fiscal year 2027. So I have 5 years to make some money to pay Uncle Sam. Now, once I pay Uncle Sam, if I keep that investment or stay in that investment for a term of 10 years, then I come out of that tax-free at the end, no capital gains whatsoever. So now all of a sudden I got time to make the money to pay my taxes. And then at the end of it, somewhere between 2032 and 2042, I can sell that project out, or I can, as a syndicated model, I can stay in that project for that period of time. And I've got all that extra money that I just made another 18% on by looking at where I put my money. All right. We're getting ready to do one that's not only an opportunity zone, but it's got a $2 million tenant improvement with it. So we're going to take advantage of all those things. We've got another project that we're doing where we bought a building. We're going to take the cost segregation on the building. It's in an opportunity zone also, right? This is like the trifecta. It's an opportunity zone project. We're going to do the cost segregation. We're taking $1.5 million in depreciation this year. That's going to go against your income, which is something you brought into this with capital gains on it. So I got you your capital gains free at that point. We're going to get it rezoned. Then we're going to demolish the building and take another $3 million in depreciation. So now I've got you $2.50 of depreciation value for every dollar you invested before we got started. Then at the end of 10 years, this is going to come out all tax-free, right? So just by looking at what you do, where you do, you can create massive tax savings, because if I'm getting you at 18%, if you're investing 100 grand and I'm getting you 2.5 times that in tax benefit at 18%, that's going to get you close to $40,000 in tax savings year one on that investment. Now I don't have to be a superstar from there, right?
People always say it's not necessarily what you make, it's what you keep. And I think, factoring in your tax plan into that is a huge component, because, people, when you ask the average person, like, what's your biggest liability and expense? They might say housing. They might say my car payment. They might say food. It's paying Uncle Sam first and foremost, because they're taking a lot off the top. And a lot of times, if you're working a W-2, they're taking it before you even get to see it.
Yeah.
So Shannon, you're playing some 3D chess here with your tax strategies, and I'm sure it's paying off. And I love this syndicated depreciation and opportunity zone structure that you have together. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Well, let me ask you this, James. What's your favorite hobby?
I like got a couple reading. I like reading. I like walking my dog. Honestly, I'll go for a lot of walks with my dog, exercising, things like that.
What about you, Patrick?
Mine is going on vacation.
Okay. So what do you like about going on vacation? Where do you like to go?
I like to go to Mexico, anywhere in the Caribbean, where it's nice and warm and the weather's great year round.
So what are you doing to write off all that travel?
Well, we are actually going and looking at properties that could be potential Airbnbs
Absolutely.
while we are there. So I can write off the stay, the flight, the meals, all that different stuff while I'm there.
And those are the exact kind of things that got me into the mess I'm in, right? That's why I'm in Puerto Rico. I was down here on a perfectly good vacation, started talking about this whole Act 2022. See, Puerto Rico is a commonwealth, so it does not pay federal income tax. And if you move to Puerto Rico, they'll let you pay 4% state tax. So I had a couple of large sales coming up, and I moved to Puerto Rico, ran a consulting company for my other companies, and was able to sell those large items and only pay 4% tax on the income, right? But again, instead of trying to do 1031s and do all this other stuff, I was able to take a huge chunk off the table, put it in my pocket, and pay a 4% tax and be completely done, and no rollover, no nothing down the road. Now, one of the things that I love to do is I love to fly, right? I'm a third generation pilot. My son's a fourth generation pilot, right? But I figured out how to pay for airplanes, have somebody else pay for them. And I figured out how to make them a tax advantage too by starting a small business and using the airplane as the asset inside that business. So when you take that airplane and you buy that airplane and you lease that to a flight school or a charter company or something like that, you see this a lot with movie stars and their jets, right? They lease their jet out. So somebody else is making the payment on it. Somebody else is paying the maintenance on it. But the tax advantage is incredible because I get to depreciate the whole aircraft day one, right? So with some financing, I'm able to magnify my tax strategies and come up with $1.50 for every dollar invested in the aircraft day one, right?
That is such a fantastic strategy. And I know, I mean, a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, have seen Grant Cardone out there because he's one of the big guys that have talked about, buying airplanes for the tax advantages and different things like that. But I think your strategy is absolutely amazing. And it reminds me a lot of kind of like what a farmer does. The farmer owns the farm and they buy the equipment, but then they lease it to their business, to be able to be a write-off. But you're just taking it in a completely different direction, with a personal aircraft or a business aircraft that you just happen to be able to use when it's not being chartered or the flight school isn't using it for training.
Right. And that's the big difference, right? I mean, Grant Cardone's a smart guy, right? I'm not going to go head to head with him on who's got the better tax strategies, but Grant has to pay for that airplane, right? I don't pay for the airplane. The students pay for the airplane. I just get to use it and take advantage of the tax benefits of it, right? I mean, think about all the people that are using the Toro app, right? Have you heard of the Toro app?
Yes.
It basically makes you a leasing company of your favorite vehicle, right? So now you can go buy something that's under 6,000 pounds that isn't necessarily a work vehicle, right? You're able to put it on the Toro app, rent it out a couple times, and take advantage of being able to write off that Corvette or McLaren or Rolls Royce, whatever you want to do, because you've used the tax code don't use it as a penal code. Don't use it as something that smacks you. Use it as something that educates you and teaches you what the government wants you to buy. See, the government can't solve the housing problem, right? And they really, honestly, they're proving right now that they can't solve the jobs problem either. But every single family home creates 700 jobs. So if we're giving people tax savings on the cost segregation on their homes because of their investments, now we're solving the housing problem and we're creating 700 jobs while we do it. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's now no longer the rich cheating the system or ripping off the rest of America. It's the rich doing the heavy lifting and making sure that everybody that got one of those paychecks for that 700 jobs paid their share of the taxes, right?
I think that's super important to realize is, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, at the end of the day, we like to believe that the politicians put together these laws to incentivize, hopefully, positive human behavior. And that's all the government's trying to do with the tax code is they're trying to marginally influence people to make certain types of investments, whether it's through the opportunity zones or investing in infrastructure. There's a whole bunch of oil and gas specific tax laws that you can get into as well. And you'll find that in housing as well with the cost segregation and things like that. So it's, as you're saying, like not see it as a penal code, but seeing it for the incentives that it creates.
Yeah. And do you know that you can use your capital gains out of housing and go straight into oil and gas? Because they wanted at the time, that may be a loophole that they're going to change, but they wanted you to do that so you could bring any capital gains into oil and gas, right? So there's opportunities there to make sure that things go the way that the government wanted to encourage the kind of things that happen that would encourage what was going to grow the economy, what was going to stabilize and move things forward in America. And I think that when you really do add that lens, it does help.
Yeah. And I also think that people need to realize that they have to be the ones to proactively think about these types of things, to proactively have these conversations with the correct people, because it's not your accountant's job. It's not your necessarily even CPA's job to bring these different things to you. So where are you figuring this stuff out? Who are you having conversations with? Where are you getting this type of information to be able to proactively and to your advantage use the tax code to your benefit?
Well, Patrick, I was having that conversation with my accountant and I got tired of asking them and hearing yes. Can I do this? Yes. Well, why didn't you tell me? Right? Well, you didn't ask, but that I buy and sell and I do this stuff. That's not my job, right? And so then I started literally reading the tax code. I found a guy by the name of Tom Wheelwright, he's Robert Kiyosaki's tax strategist, Kenny McElroy, a lot of really big guys. And I started reading what he had to say. And I started really just taking it on myself to become a person that understood the tax code. Then I happened to run into a really good buddy of mine who's a tax strategist, which really means that he's the unaccountant, right? I mean, he's right-brained in a left-brain world, right? He can really see solutions. The other thing that I would encourage people to do is have meetings with your accountant in July and in November when they're not busy, right? Because when you sit down with them and go, hey, so far this year, I've made about 60% of my money and it's looking like this, and I was thinking about doing that, what should I do? Well, maybe you ought to look at this, or maybe you ought to do that, or maybe you should consider these things. Oh, yeah. Okay. When they're not, bloodshot eyeballs and hair going everywhere because it's April 12th and you're coming in going, hey, by the way, the cake is already baked. We're just frosting it at that point. So when you're trying to get tax strategy advice, there's only so much they can do after the year end. But I meet with my accountant in July, and then I meet with them in November. And after that, I know that I've got my next 45 days lined out on what I've got to do to hit that, make sure that everything's locked in and dialed. And for 12 of the last 13 years, I haven't had a tax bill.
And I think that's super important. People, this is not tax post-op. This is tax planning, and planning has to occur before the critical moment, which is the last minute of the last day of the year. And you definitely want to figure everything out before that. But Shannon, I'm kind of curious, I think you have a lot of experience in business and you've grown a lot of successful things. At what point in your career and business life did you really start to appreciate focusing in on the taxes? Was it day one, or did you have to pay a lot of taxes and kind of realize what you're losing before you kind of had it all click?
I really wish I could say that I got it up front and I did well and I never did. But, it took writing a couple hundred $200,000 checks that really made it relevant. I mean, everybody talks about '08 was so bad. '08 was so bad. I went back and got a $300,000 tax refund, right? I mean, I had paid in that much tax in '07, right? So I understand that pain pain is my biggest teacher, but it was through those kinds of things, and it was asking those kinds of questions and then just kind of fumbling my way along to where I understood that if I majored in the minor of tax, which is the last thing most people think about, if I really focus on that as my strategy to do most things, I will make somewhere between 18 and 37% based on my tax bracket right up front, and I don't have to wait for the results to come out. Not that you ever want a deal to go south, but sometimes a deal that goes south provides even more tax benefits for a deal that went north, right? So when you really understand that, it doesn't make the loss less painful, but it lets you understand that putting this together is, and we saw a lot of people in the last 18 to 24 months, they sold something and they made money. And then they couldn't find a replacement property, or they wound up with something less, and they worked so hard to avoid the tax, and then they had to pay 18%, when if they would have done a reverse 1031 exchange, bought the first property or bought the replacement property before they sold the first property, they could have avoided that panic, created the same kind of opportunity. But how many people knew about a reverse 1031 exchange, right?
Well,
what is that? Please, I'd like to go into
so
detail.
let's just assume.
I mean,
let's assume maybe
assume
our
we're
listeners
idiots.
don't know. Maybe not me. Maybe I know about it. Maybe I don't. So, Shannon, why don't you tell us about the reverse 1031? We're curious.
Well, a 1031 exchange is that you sell a property for $200,000 and you spend $1 more than you sold for, and you're able to replace that and push that tax into the next deal, right? So no taxes now. A reverse, it's just a reverse, right? So now you're going to sell that asset, and you know what you want, but you see this deal out there and you go, oh my gosh, that is an amazing deal. I got to have that. So you go buy that property and you go, well, I was already thinking about selling maybe 12th Street, or maybe I was going to sell Johnson Avenue. You know what? Let's go ahead and buy this in an exchange. And then I have 45 days to name 3 properties that I'm going to sell, one of the 3. Then I have 180 days to sell that property and complete my exchange, but in reverse. The fees are the same, right? So now you're able to basically play the movie backwards, where you can go find your replacement and then decide which one's going to sell.
Is there anything special with the money going in to the 1031 exchange and the money coming out? Because, obviously when you're 1031ing regularly, you're not supposed to touch the money. It's supposed to be held in escrow, and, you shouldn't have your hands on it. Is there anything similar like that on the reverse?
It still is, right? So if you're taking out recourse debt, that's fine. You're still on the hook while the title company's in title, right? If you're doing non-recourse debt, obviously that's a little bit easier, but you're able to do the same thing. And basically you go in and you strike the deal, and it's, Patrick and James and/or assigns, right? And this will be part of a 1031, right? All that's in your contract. And then you go to the closing table, you've got your capital arrangement. Everybody knows what's going on, right? And then all of a sudden when you close, it's ABC Accommodators are the owner in, it's not in lieu of, but anyway, the accommodator is in there in your stead, and then you have to sell something to complete the transaction, right?
Gotcha.
So now
so
when
it's
you
still
sell,
in that limbo.
yeah. So you bought $1 million property, you got to sell something for $999,000, right? So you got to sell something, and then those proceeds are left in there. But the reality is, the real thing that you got to have is you got to have the source of the funds to do the deal first. And that's where a lot of people kind of get a little bit hung up, right? If you've got, $300,000 equity and you were going to use that for your down payment, right? But those are the kind of things that you can look at that then allow you to not get stuck in between, and then know that every single deal that you're ever going to do is going to work out that way, and you're not going to have that, right?
So just to kind of highlight that distinction, the exchange company is taking temporary title until you sell your property, and then they'll, deed it over to James and Patrick or whoever it may be.
Correct. Yeah. And they're collecting they're collecting the rents, they're doing all those things. They're going to hire the management company it's exactly like they are what you are. And typically, if you've got your stuff dialed in, it's not usually a 180-day process, right? But you can usually get that done fairly quickly and make sure that you're now in that position. Another option to not do a 1031 exchange, to sell something and avoid the taxes, is a deferred sales trust. So a deferred sales trust, we're going to use the three of us. I'm the seller, Patrick's the buyer, James is the trust. So I'm going to sell my property for 10 million bucks and Patrick's going to buy it. Patrick doesn't get anything different, right? But I only owe, my tax basis in my property is $4 million. So I'm going to sell it to the trust, or I'm going to sell it to James for $10 million with $4 million down, right? And I'm going to carry a note with the trust at 8% interest for 10 years. So then I sell it to James. James sells it to Patrick. That all happens simultaneously at closing. James has now got $6 million in his pocket. As my trust, I have checkbook control. So James, I want you to go buy that apartment building over there. I'm still not paying taxes on it, but I didn't want to spend $10 million. I only want to spend 5, right? So that wouldn't qualify for a 1031 because I didn't spend more. So now I'm able to use that and go into the trust and say, trust, go buy that for me. Thank you, James. Now pay me 8% on my money. So you've got $6 million of my money. You're paying me 8%. I pay a dividend, which is equivalent of capital gains, 18%. I pay that as a dividend because it's interest. And the trust has the funds, right? Now this can go on. I can renew the note in 10 years. We can continue to do this. Or I can say, James, go give me that property, buy that property for me over there, and then take the property as the full payment at any time. But in the meantime, James is Switzerland or tax land. He has the tax implication in that trust that nobody can touch because he hasn't spent it. He owes it. I'm due the money, but I haven't collected it. So it's in limbo, but we're still buying and selling. So now you're able to do things with it. And at the end of the day, you clean out the trust, you sweep it. There's nothing left in it. James made no money. Sorry, buddy. I like you, but not that much, man. So again, just another strategy that's readily available to do some creative things.
I absolutely love these creative ideas, and I've been diving more and more into these creative ideas and trying to understand it more, because I think myself and maybe majority of our listeners kind of aren't quite there yet, but you have to have this information coming to you, because you can be doing it on a smaller scale as well. It doesn't have to be a $10 million property. It could be a $1 million property. It could be a $3 million property. It could be a couple $100,000 property.
It can be
However,
whatever you want. It could be you want to buy a Camaro. Whatever it is, there's no reason to pay taxes. Jeff Bezos didn't just wake up one day and go, okay, thank God I'm finally tax free. It started when he was at the beginning of this journey. So you're exactly right. You've got to start it when you're small and integrate it now.
yeah. So what would be some action items for our listeners out there, that have a small portfolio, to kind of start setting themselves up to be able to do some of these advanced, tax strategies? What would you recommend?
The first thing I would do is I would pick up any of Tom Wheelwright's books. They're written in English. They're not accountantese. You can really understand them. And the other thing that I would look for is a tax strategist. If anybody wants to do your books after they do your strategy, you're probably with the wrong person. But there are tax strategists out there. A lot of them will do it on a percentage basis. So what we save you, we're taking a piece of. I like that, right? So you're going to save me 100 grand in taxes. You're going to take 30 of it. I was already going to give it to the government. At least maybe you'll buy me a cheeseburger when we're done with this thing, right? So those are the two things that I would do. But I would, first of all, I would absolutely buy Tom Wheelwright's books and I would read them and I would understand it, because when you're talking with this tax strategist, we haven't begun to talk about R&D taxes, right? We haven't begun to talk about how you're writing off your cryptocurrency. I mean, there's just so many other things there that when you understand how that works, right? I mean, we're doing an R&D project right now that we think that we can make the walls more insulated. So when we get done, we've wasted all the materials to build the walls with the new insulation in it. So we've expended that. That's the research. And what we found is a better way to do it. Maybe, maybe not, but there's a write-off there, right? I mean, there's just so many different things, but if you're not taking the time to pursue the knowledge, you wouldn't know if you're talking to a real strategist or not, right? So you've got to educate yourself enough to be dangerous, right? You got to be the blind kid running down the hallway with scissors.
So you had mentioned something that, is personally interesting to me, because I finally took the dive recently, got into it because of the exact tax benefit that you're kind of identifying here for all our listeners, is the Bitcoin mining space and the tax benefit that comes from that. Can you kind of get into that a little bit and describe what's going on there? Because there's a huge tax benefit that is out in the open for people to take advantage of here.
Well, it's massive. And, everybody has started out lamenting the fact that Bitcoin went from 65 to, 19,000 today, right? But think of, when Bitcoin mining first came out, they used to do it on your laptop, right? Now they've got specialized machines and you host them and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is you're physically creating, whether it's in the digital world, the hashtag or whatever, but you're physically creating a token, a valuable thing that the IRS says, well, the tools that you use to create that token are depreciable assets. So you go out and you buy Bitcoin mining machines, you write off the Bitcoin mining machines, right, against your income. And that is against ordinary income, right? So a lot of people run into situations where, well, I can't take the depreciation because I'm not a full-time real estate person, or I'm not this. But depreciation against tools are against the business that creates them, which you are the pass-through on that business, even in a simple LLC. So you go out and you buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin mining equipment. We raised a fund. We did that. We bought the equipment. It's now creating Bitcoin. Okay. We're not selling the Bitcoin and distributing cash to our investors. We're actually giving them fractions of the Bitcoin, right? So now, James, you invested $10,000 with us. We bought the machines. Here's $2,500 in depreciation that goes back against your 30% tax. So that's going to save you $800, right? 800 real dollars. Okay, that's great. Now we're going to give you back a half a Bitcoin. So now we gave you $10,000. Our cost in our manufacturing facility in our Bitcoin mine was $8,000. So now $8,000 for a whole Bitcoin. So now you're looking at it going, hey, I had $4,000 in cost, but I got $8,000 in Bitcoin. So I have $4,000 in profit. But that's the only time you have to pay taxes on it. Mm-hmm. As you know, James, when that thing goes back to 65, let's say it goes back to 100, and you do what's called DeFi, which is get a home equity line of credit on your Bitcoin, right? I mean, that's just really what it is. You get a low leverage debt on your Bitcoin. You could get up to 60% of that money back out. And since it's a refinance, it's not a taxable event. You never sold it. So now you look at that and you go, wow, I bought low, I built low. I ride that up to 100. I'm able to pull 60,000 back out that I've got $5,000 in. I've got 60,000 to go buy other assets with, or other miners with, or whatever, and I still have the value of the coin. And so again, James, that's a very, very tax forward strategy with a long-term implication on it, because you know as well as I do that Bitcoin is going somewhere. But even today, when you look at it and go, gosh, I could really literally hard cost be into Bitcoin for what it was going for in 2018. Why wouldn't I do that? Right.
And I think, more along those lines, when you buy the miners, you obviously have the tax depreciation. That's great. And you also have the upfront cost, but you can also look at it as a dollar cost averaging into the asset, because you're paying the hosting fee monthly basis and you're getting Bitcoin out of it, hopefully more than you're paying in cost to mine it, and energy that's going into it. But it's a good way to DCA into it. And I think it's a strategy worth exploring for people that have a few $1,000s, because I know there's a lot of companies out there that will host for you. Like, it's not a super complicated thing. Like, you don't have to know or have that technical expertise. You can find these companies that'll help facilitate everything, and it's just a couple clicks of buttons.
Listen, James, I'm one step away from Velcro shoes, kind of stupid. Okay. And I've figured out how to do it on a large scale. And the reality is exactly that, right? Because what you're able to do is you're able to put the pieces together. But here's another thing. You talked about the energy. So I can sell my Bitcoin and then buy my electricity, or I can pay my electricity as a cost out of my business and have it come against me, but keep that Bitcoin, because when I sell it today, I'm selling it at 19, but I sold it, so I created a tax problem. If I keep it and keep injecting money into my business, I haven't created that sale yet. I haven't created that profit. And then when it's all the way back up at 100, I didn't lose that little bitty fractional bit that at $200 a month for the power, $2,400 a year was a quarter of a Bitcoin that's now worth 100 grand.
Exactly.
And it's the little things, right? It's the little things that make all the difference.
Man, do I wish I would have realized all of this stuff when I was mining Ethereum back in 2017.
But at least you kept the card, right? I mean, you still have the Ethereum, not like the guy that threw it in the junkyard, right?
No, I actually sold it all. So
well,
yeah,
you
that
sold
was
it, so you got some benefit.
Yeah, I mean, right now it'd be like I don't know, not right now, but last year it would have been close to $300,000 or $400,000 worth. But here nor there, we all learn from our mistakes. But had I realized about some of these tax implications on some of the things I could have done by depreciating all of that year one, if I would have really known, it definitely would have changed some of my thought process on doing some of that, because I was doing exactly what you said. I was paying for the electricity out of pocket, doing all of that aspect of it. So that's really huge for some of the listeners out there. We kind of just dove right into everything right off the bat. So I want to rewind for just a second. And if you could kind of give everybody that now has heard a ton of great advice from you, or not advice, but guidance,
Real
an
life case studies.
a whole lot of case studies, an overview of kind of, what your businesses are and kind of portfolio looks like on a grand scale today. I think that would, really be great.
So, as we know, I've got a flight school, a Bitcoin mining operation. We are moving into the Turo space because I like different cars and I want to write them off and not have to worry about them weighing 6,000 pounds. I have a construction and development company. We're all the way from Washington to Florida on construction development deals. And currently we've got a portfolio of about $165 million worth, and we've got probably another 800 doors in our pipeline. And so we're able to create the original value add out of finding the dirt, building the building, putting the tenants in there, and creating that value between it cost $10 million to build it. And with the tenants in there, as you all know, based on a cap rate, it's now worth 12 or 13 or 14. And that's the original value add. So that's really kind of my main thrust in there. We actually did do a value add office building this last year. We added that to our portfolio. So we've just kind of grown organically. And I've been doing this for about 28 years on my own, worked with my dad growing up. But other than that, I've just kind of been out here making it work. And we've been able to create a decent portfolio in the last 2.5 years. We've been using that syndicated model. We raised about $58 million in capital to work with. And we're just kind of starting to get into, I think, a groove where we are doing the same thing again and again and again.
Shannon, that's awesome, man. You got a lot of great stuff going on. But I'm really curious, with everything that's going on in the world, like things are changing. What out of everything you got going on in your pipeline, what excites you the most? Like, where do you think you're going to find the most opportunity in the things that you currently have going on in the next maybe 12 to 24 months?
Well, in the change, right? I mean, things are changing for people that are newer, right? I mean, I've been doing this for 28 years. I remember one of the very first development projects I ever did with my brother. He was digging the foundation. I was at the architect's office when the Twin Towers got hit, right? There's been nothing but change in my whole relationship with real estate. And so I think when you underwrite properly, and you give yourself the margins that are supposed to be there, you're going to continue to have success. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a huge surge in deals that are going to come back on the market that are going to get retraded. I think you're going to see a continued demand for new multifamily developments because home building's off the market, right? You're going to see a big shift. I think you're going to finish off the millennials, right? There were some of them that were hopeful for single family home ownership. Now we're just going to gun them down, throw them in the street. They're not going to have that home ownership opportunity because with $400,000 homes and 7% interest rates, it's just not going to be possible for them, which is going to finish building out a lot of new multifamily. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity if you can get in front of large scale multifamily in syndicated world. You're going to see a lot of that become really, really popular. The other thing is you're going to see build to rent really take off because people won't give up on that dream of home ownership. They're just going to become a tenant for life.
With the build to rent, explain that a little bit for us. So that is because my one of my uncles, he bought up a bunch of construction companies in the South, and they were doing the kind of build to rent model with, buying up 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 single family home tracts that they were all turning into rentals in like the Kentucky, North, South Carolina, Georgia area. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, not everybody wants to live in a vertical stack, right? So now you're going in and you're doing the same thing. The thing that was inefficient about, and we've all been there, right? I mean, we've all bought a house here and then a house across town and a house over here, and they're all different faucets, right? There's no standardized paint. You've got 27 different kinds of flooring that you're trying to chase down, right? If you think about a build to rent subdivision, you got 3 different exterior colors. You've got 2 different flooring options. They're all the same. They're all in the same block. You've got a maintenance guy that shows up on Wednesday and drives around like the ice cream man, fixing screen doors and making, little old ladies happy. That's the kind of benefit that you're getting from the multiplicity that happens in one location. And before really now, you weren't getting that because people weren't thinking about buying the whole subdivision. They were thinking about, well, I'm going to own an apartment complex. But there's still people that want the yard space, they want the dog, they want the swing set for their kids. This is that option, but they're taking out the whole subdivision, right? And then there's also builders probably like your uncle that are building all these houses, selling them all to individual investors, but keeping the maintenance and the management contracts and the leasing contracts so that they're keeping everything churning, keeping everybody happy. You're just collecting a check, really becoming the owner, the guarantors, and the passive investor while this guy's doing all the maintenance and management for you.
Yeah, so many incredible, great opportunities and strategies out there to think big. And I think that is a huge theme for this conversation that we're having is thinking big, getting outside of your comfort zone and taking these opportunities into your own hands, specifically, with the taxes, like being able to keep as much money as you're, legally able to be able to invest. And who wouldn't, be able to invest in some bigger projects if they were able to save themselves 20, 30+%, if not wipe out their entire tax bill like we were able to do for 2021 by knowing the different strategies that you can. And that gives you an opportunity to scale even faster and do even bigger deals. Specifically when You're talking about the syndication model, which we have had a couple syndicators on, and no one has ever really articulated and brought the tax strategy session like you have up front on how people are getting a return on their dollars up front in the deal before they execute the value add, before they execute the 5-year plan, and how they're able to keep their money enrolled into the next deal. So this is all amazing stuff.
Well, let's think about this, Patrick. 2021, you didn't pay taxes. Congratulations. Now you're a rabid dog after not trying not to pay taxes in 2022. I'd hate to see the monster you're going to become by 2025. You're going to be like me, right? You're going to be absolutely everything you do. You're looking for the way to not pay the tax. And then everything in your life is going to multiply by about 30%. And you're going to do some really awesome things with it that are going to allow you to enjoy life and donate to the causes and be a part of the things that you want, instead of throwing it at the government, hoping they do something decent with it before they squander it.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, man, I really would like to get into we know where you're headed, the different strategies and all that. But, you know, why are you doing all of this? Like, what really motivates you to have these multiple different companies, these giant aspirations and goals? Like, break that down for us.
I was always a kid that liked to take things apart as a child, and I love the art of the deal, but I want to make the deal better, right? And so I've always looked at that and I've gone, okay, how can I win? How can my investors win? How can everybody involved win? And then how can we sweeten this up? And with just a few tweaks and a few combinations and doing things in a different light, we're able to do that. But for me, I think I'm going to steal Donald Trump's book title and go, it's the art of the deal, man. I mean, I really, really love just, I got to tell you, there's something sweet about getting in your airplane and flying off and knowing that the tax man bought it for you. I mean, there's just something cool about it.
I I freaking love that. I freaking love that.
So
Oh my
Shannon,
God.
I love that, and it's there's a satisfaction that you get from that too. It's like it's a strategic winning victory, and you have to get to a certain point where you can have that appreciation for that, because you're taking advantage of all the resources that are in front of you, but
Right.
you're just taking action to make sure that they're working to your benefit. And we had this discussion already. I mean, that's what the tax code is. Like, you just got to figure it out and apply it.
Well, and surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, right? I mean, look, I can paint, but I'm not the best painter. I got a really good one, right? So why do I think I have to know all the tax strategies? I go to seminars. I spend time with Tom Wheelwright. I spend time with another tax strategist, Larry, that I really make sure that I understand this so that then I can help other people. We had some doctors that recently sold their business. I was the first call they made. These guys are doctors, man. I mean, one's an oral surgeon, for crying out loud. They called me going, hey, we just got X dollars and we know you'll help us not pay taxes on it. Well, that was a great problem to solve. And we had some great conversations. So I think we're going to do some awesome things for them. But they were from the Socialist Republic of California. So they do have to pay California tax. They can't get out of that, right? But they can get out of all the federal on this really large chunk of money and invest it for their future and for their families.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of you're right. That's half the juice right there, is knowing you got one over on the man.
For sure. Absolutely. So why don't you outline for us a little bit about your goals? You've got a lot of irons in the fire here. But a couple years down the road, like what are you trying to grow? Like where are you trying to be? Like what are some of the metrics and benchmarks that you're trying to meet over the next few years?
You hear a lot of people say, I want to have, 5,000 doors, or I want to do, this many deals. I really don't care how many deals I do. I would love to see me, my businesses, my organizations figure out how to change the lives of 600 or 700 people through their investment strategies, get them out of their W-2s, get them into the world that they want to be in, and make the kind of investments that make sense. I mean, look, there's no business owner on the planet. If you called them up and said, I can add 9% to your bottom line and don't change a thing you do about your business, they'd take the call. But how many investors could actually walk away from their W-2 job a lot earlier if they understood how the tax strategies really worked and used them to their advantage and got out of that W-2 and bought their time back? I mean, that's really the race, right, James? We have a limited time on this planet. We've only got so many revolutions, and we're trading that time for money. Get into a place and help others get into a place where that time and that decision of where to spend that time is completely in your hands. That's really what I want to see myself and my companies be able to do in the next 5 years.
That is fantastic. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more about the impact that being able to help people achieve that, leaving their job and giving them the freedom to fully go after and chase their passion and what they really want to do. And I know I left my job last year, and since then I have, felt this overwhelming calm every single day. I wake up earlier, I'm happier, and I'm working harder than ever, but it's for me.
Yeah.
And I've seen my business and the things that I've been doing absolutely explode, just not having the weight of all of that on there. So with that being said, what obstacles, are you and your business going to be facing to achieve, those things that you want to be able to accomplish over the next couple of years?
I don't think we're facing any obstacles. We don't sell anything, right? We educate. So our whole approach is, if you're wanting to connect with us, we're going to educate you on what options are available to you. So I think if there is an obstacle, it's bandwidth, right? How far can our signal go? How many people can we give our message to that says, hey, you don't have to do this anymore, right? I mean, James, if I would have come to you, or Patrick, actually, you were the one that just quit your job. If I would have come to you in 2019 and said, I can show you how to quit your job, you probably wouldn't have believed me. Now you are like an evangelist on fire about telling everybody they can quit their job. And they're looking at you going, I guess I could because Patrick did it. Right. And so it's getting that education to people. It's having the success stories of other people going, oh my gosh, I was able to do this. Right. I was able to strategize. We have one of our investors that has I'm his first call, and he's like, okay, I want to do this and I want to do that. He's starting to think for himself, which is awesome. And he comes in, he says, I want to set up this string of investments right here that will all be tax free. And I'm like, that's amazing, right? He's now starting to make investments in his granddaughter's name, right? So that she can begin to grow tax free. He's using wealth transfer benefits that he can give these things away to people during that period, so that he's now thinking generationally. And 2 years ago, he was employed, right? So it's that kind of a thing where our bandwidth is our limiting factor. We're really working hard to educate, so that out of your education, you can turn around and educate others. That's why I love opportunities like this. And I really appreciate you guys for having me on the show, but also the time and the effort. I don't think a lot of people understand the time and the effort that goes into putting on a podcast to help other people get out from under the man, get out to where they have their own freedom. They're breathing their own air. Patrick, as you know, that's different air. That no job air, that's really good air, right? And that's what I really believe in, and figuring ways out that you can get that signal out farther and educate more to be able to do that, to get other people to the same place to enjoy the same things that you do.
Exactly. Man, do I love all of these answers. I think that you have been providing so much hard hitting, actionable advice for all of our listeners out there. James and I have the hats on. After this conversation, you guys definitely need to go out, decide, commit, and take the action on putting your life into your own hands, man. Man, this is exactly why we do it. And like you said, we are doing this out of our free time because we really just want to help people. We want to enlighten people. We want to educate, inspire, and motivate. Like, that's the whole point of this podcast. I mean, James, come on now. What do you got to say, bro?
I think if you leave this conversation without any actionable things to do, tax wise or motivationally with your business, like you put the phone down, go take a walk, reevaluate yourself, come back, re-listen to everything, because there's hundreds, if not millions of dollars of content in here. And if you're playing your cards right, you can achieve that. For
And
sure.
for $29.95, you can have this episode. No, I'm just kidding. But that's really the truth, right? How many times do people hear something like this and they go, oh, that's for other people? It's not. It's literally not, and that's the thing that I think, you guys are feeling that. You guys are on the cutting edge of that. You guys are making that transition, as we talked about before the show. You guys are making that transition to outgrowing people, outgrowing the people you used to work with, because your business is growing. And now I can tell you, after 2021, you've got 30% more to put into your business. And next year, that 30% is going to yield you another 9% on top of the 30% that you saved. I mean, this is going to get exponential pretty quick. You guys are going to hockey stick fast. And it's because you guys are taking the time to educate yourself and educate others. And I really appreciate that.
All right. Well, that is an absolute perfect segue into the last segment of the show, which James and I like to call the Big Four. James, take it away.
So, Shannon, I want you to tell our listeners something that you do that's like a financial independence hack, something that just feels like a cheat code. And I know you've got a lifetime of experience and things to share, and I know you're going to pull out a really good one. But what's something that you think our listeners could take away briefly, just to elevate themselves financially?
I think if you're still working a W-2, the very first thing you need to do is go start a business. You file an LLC, should cost you $100. You get an EIN number. You move all of your cell phones, all of your internet, all of your disposable monthly costs, your Netflix, all that kind of stuff into that business. It just got 30% cheaper. That's $500 a month. That's going to save you $150 because it's a business expense, because you can't do your business of consulting with yourself without that. How many businesses have losses for the first 5 years? Most of them. That's a really simple thing you can do to save yourself money and not really do anything different.
There you go.
Love it. Love it. All right. This one we call resources. Now, we know you have already given out a ton of really great resources, but are there any specific books, podcast, or people that have shaped or influenced you in your financial independence journey and your wealth building journey that our listeners should definitely go check out, besides Tom Willwright? Because we've got that one down. They're already going there.
I would say there are so many people in your neighborhood that you can tap into. I mean, it's one thing to idolize Grant Cardone or, Joe Fairless or some of these other guys that have done amazing things, right? But who's the guy that's 2 levels up from you? Have coffee with him, right? The guy that owns 100 units is willing to teach the guy that owns 10. He's willing to mentor him. He's willing to help them. Get around people that are a couple steps ahead of you. Don't go get starstruck and go looking for superstars. While books are great, they're only good if you're actioning them, if you're doing anything about it. Get with the guy at the coffee shop that, or in your town that is where you want to be. Just ask him questions, plug into him. I think you're going to get a lot more value out of that because he's going to hold you a little bit more accountable and he's going to be right down the street.
That's awesome. And I think, that kind of goes at the advice of don't do what those people are doing today. Do what they did to get where they are,
Yeah.
So, people they get starstruck, like you said, and they get too obsessed about, the life that person is living in the moment. But you need to focus on doing those actions that people took to get where they are. And I think identifying those people that are just slightly above you with the levels, gives you really actionable advice to learn from.
I agree.
Absolutely. So, Shannon, this is our next question. I want you to kind of paint a picture of 5 years in the future. Like, where's Shannon at? What's his business looking like? What's his personal life looking like? Paint that picture of 5 year in the future of Shannon for us.
I think I think as we discussed before, I think it looks very, very similar. maybe a little bit more gray in the hair, but it's, to me, I believe life is about designing the world you want to live in. So I live a really pretty amazing life, right? I mean, I have 5 airplanes. I live in Puerto Rico. I take vacations. We're doing projects in Costa Rica. I created a life I don't need a vacation from. And I didn't do it overnight. And I didn't expect myself to get there right away. But it's like I've discussed 100 times. I don't ever see me stopping the deal stuff. The deal flow will always be there, right? I hope that maybe at some point I've got the next Dread Private Roberts behind me that's, in the trenches slogging it out. I'm just able to show up and go, I'd like some of that. Give me that building over there. Oh, I like that one, right? Because I think there's always going to be deals to do. And I think that's always going to be a part of my future. But I would like to be able to make that more of a lifestyle like I have, to where, yeah, let's go do a month in Portugal and pick up a piece.
What a great answer. What a great answer to be inspired by. Whoa. All right. So for all of our listeners out there that want to get in touch with you, that want to tell you that this podcast inspired them, that just want to be following along on your journey to get some more of these great nuggets, where's the best place for them to reach out and connect with you?
Well, funny you should say connect, because it is just that. You send me an email at connect@shannonrobnett.com, and we'll give you links to everything else we've got. You'll have access to my calendar. So if you want to talk tax, you want to talk deals, be more than happy to do that. I've got a book list, website, all that stuff's there at connect@shannonrobnett.com.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right, guys. You know the drill. This episode's been absolutely awesome. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to drop a comment, subscribe, like. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, do us a favor, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review. James and I, that's all we live for. That's all we're working for, is your reviews. Google, all of that other stuff. Even if you hate the podcast, leave us a review, do something for the algorithm. And we appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
See you
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Real FI podcast, where you learn from the investors that have lived the hard lessons for you. To connect with us during your pursuit of financial independence, be sure to join our community by following us on Instagram or emailing us at info@therealfi.com. If this content made you financially, mentally, physically, or spiritually richer, please make sure to leave us a positive review on your preferred content platform. Cheers to kicking